The shocking truth behind Paul calling himself a slave, what you never knew at midnight. In the heart of the city, something dark twisted under the blaring neon lights. Shadows danced, flickering between the alleys as a chilling wind whispered secrets meant to shake your core. It was the witching hour when Paul, with a voice like thunder, shouted into the void, "I am a slave." The words sliced through the night like a knife, sending shivers down spines, igniting whispers of confusion. Why would someone willingly identify with such a heavy burden? What depths did Paul dwell in to reach such a conclusion? As the night deepened and the crowd thickened, strange tales began to swirl like autumn leaves caught in a storm. Some claimed they witnessed chains shimmering around his wrists, faint as moonlight but just enough to chill your soul. Others called it a trick of the light, but those who dared look closer felt the weight of something unworldly clinging to him. His eyes, wild and glossy, held a haunting truth, years of pain etched into each line on his face, a map of sorrow that tugged at hearts like a well-pulled string. Lurking behind the excitement, the reality was heavier, suffocating. People gawked and gasped, their faces painted with disbelief, as Paul recounted tales of nights spent in shackles, both literal and metaphorical. The air was thick with suspense, thick enough to cut. As the seconds ticked by, every heartbeat felt like a countdown, each soul ensnared by the magnetic pull of his story. Who was Paul really? Just a man crying for attention? Or a prophet of pain, a living piece of a broken history crying out for redemption? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The crowd leaned in, hungry for answers. Murmurs spiraled, a mixture of fascination and horror filling the air. Just then, a distant siren howled, its wail echoing through the streets, drowning out his next words. Tension snapped like a tightrope straining underfoot. What if his truth was more terrifying than anyone dared imagine? What life had built the man beneath those gripping tales? Was he just fooling himself, or did he hold the key to something grander, a lesson wrapped up in shackles? As the last flickers of the streetlights buzzed overhead, a figure emerged from the darkness, fingers clutching an ancient book, glimmering with possibilities. It seemed Paul knew more than he was telling, and time was ticking for him to reveal it. Questions hung like storm clouds, waiting to burst. The night was far from over, and the truth behind Paul's declaration was just lurking at the edge, ready to pounce. The air crackled with tension, like the heavy moment before a storm. Paul's gaze landed on the stranger with the ancient book. The crowd, a sea of faces, fell silent, straining to grasp the unfolding scene. What secrets lay hidden in that book? The stranger, cloaked in shadows, stepped forward, eyes glittering like shards of glass under streetlight. Your chains are not just tales, Paul, the figure spoke, voice smooth yet cold, each word deliberate. They are your reality. But only if you let them bind you. A shiver ran down Paul's spine. He took a step back, surprised. Every eye in the crowd darted between the two men as if anticipating a clash, a revelation. The air was electric, and the sirens from earlier still echoed in the periphery, blending with the palpable fear that hung around them. The stranger held up the book, its worn leather cover crackling as he turned it to face Paul. You need to confront what lies inside, he urged, to understand the true weight of your enslavement. Some in the crowd scoffed, their hands crossing over their chests, mockery thinly veiled. It's just a trick. One man shouted, his voice slicing through the tumult. He's just looking for attention. Others leaned in closer, entranced by the dark pull of intrigue. It was a battle of wills, an unspoken contest of who could dominate the night's narrative. Paul's mind raced. What did this stranger know that he didn't? Could this book hold the key to his liberation or lead him further down the path of despair? It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, one foot hovering in uncertainty. "Look closely," the stranger said, lowering the book, his voice hissing like a whisper in the wind. "You're not just a slave to your past. You're imprisoned in a cycle. You let fear dictate your choices." The crowd's breath hitched, and Paul felt a lump form in his throat. How had this man seen through him so easily? Was he so transparent? The memories flooded in shackles of regret, chains of doubt. He wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead, his heart echoed a stark recognition. The stranger tilted his head, almost as if he could read Paul's thoughts. "It's time to break free." Suddenly, the wind picked up, swirling around them like a tempest. The book's pages rustled violently, each gust a haunting echo of the stories contained within. Paul's heart quickened, battling the dread creeping through him. He felt eyes upon him, piercing through him like arrows. What did they expect? What did he expect? A low rumble of thunder rolled across the skyline, echoing the gravity of the moment. "Will you allow your story to end as a mere tale of woe?" The stranger pressed, intensity sparking in his gaze. "Or will you rise?" Paul's breath hitched. Choices loomed like shadows in the dark, a fork in the road with no clear direction. The crowd was wrong, and maybe right. Was this all an act? Or a chance to shed the weight of despair? Moments stretched into eternity. The weight of 100 gazes laid bare the rawness of his soul. Paul's heart hammered in his chest. The answers waited within that book, yet the stakes felt impossibly high. With trembling fingers, Paul reached out, hovering above the book's edge. Light flickered in the corners of his vision, a new beginning shimmered just out of reach. What would he discover? And would it bring him freedom or bind him tighter? But behind him, a shadow shifted, lurking with intent. The weight of his decision was matched only by the looming threat inching closer. As he grasped the edge of the book, as whispers clung to the wind, the question hung heavy and electric: what dark truth awaited him? Would he stand tall or collapse under the weight of his own story? The night was far from over, and the real revelation was just around the corner. With hands trembling, Paul wrapped his fingers around the ancient book's spine. Its texture was rough, the edges fraying, yet he felt an unexpected warmth radiate from it. A pulse of energy, a lifeline cast into treacherous waters. The crowd watched with bated breath, shadows of doubt flickering in their eyes. "What's inside?" he whispered. The stranger leaned in closer, a knowing smirk creeping across his lips. "The truth, or a mirror reflecting your worst fears," he breathed, voice barely louder than the rustling leaves. "Open it, and you'll know which weight you'll carry forward." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. They could feel the drama unfolding with every tick of the clock, the electric tension crackling almost tangibly in the night air. Without thinking, Paul pulled the book closer to him, its pages fluttering as if alive, longing to be read. "Stop!" cried a sharp voice from the crowd. A woman pushed her way through, panic-stricken. Her hair whipped around her face like wild tendrils. "Don't listen to him. He's not here to help." Paul hesitated, glancing back at her. The crowd rippled with murmurs of agreement and dissent. Was he a pawn in a twisted game? Ignoring her, Paul opened the book with a soft creak. The pages glowed faintly, revealing text that danced and shifted before his eyes. Each word seemed alive, echoing fragments from his own past. Heart racing, he read aloud, a steady tremor threading his voice as he stumbled over the words. "They came in chains, into darkness. I watched them lose their hope." A sudden gust of wind cut through the air, extinguishing the nearby street lamp, plunging the area into shadow. Gasps echoed around him. Chaos erupted, and in that moment of panic, Paul felt a sharp, clear vision of himself, his past failures, his missed opportunities lapping at his mind like a restless tide. "Finish reading," whispered the stranger, the intensity of his gaze lodged firmly on Paul. "Find the truth hidden within." "What truth?" Paul yelled back, frustration boiling over. Do you think I don't already know my darkness? All of it. The stranger's voice roared against the howling wind. Your hidden potential. Your true self that you've locked away. The woman who had shouted before stepped forward again, her eyes fierce. If you go further, you'll unleash something you can't control. This isn't a game, Paul. This is dangerous. But Paul couldn't look away from the shimmering pages. Each word was a thread trying to pull him deeper into the fabric of his own story. He clenched his jaw, battling against the voices in his head. This was his moment. Will you choose to be the hero of your own tale? The stranger implored. Or will you let the darkness consume you? As he stood at that precipice, thunder rolled once more loud, crashing a warning or a challenge. It electrified the air, and Paul's heart thundered in his chest. With a surge of resolve, he plunged forward, fingers running over the words. Light flared around him, and everyone recoiled, stunned. And then, in the depths of a blinding brightness, he saw it clearly, a path forward that twisted out of the familiar darkness. But just as swiftly, an ominous shadow swept across the ground, casting him into cold despair. Paul! The woman cried, her fingers grasping at him, but the light had already sealed away his past. What have you done? The stranger's voice roared, shaking with fury. The crowd murmured in fear as darkness pooled around their feet, the ground trembling violently. What power had been unleashed? What consequences would ripple out from this moment of defiance? As the thunder boomed overhead, Paul's heart raced. Had he just stepped into liberation? Or had he awakened something sinister? The night was no longer just a backdrop, it had transformed into a battlefield, and Paul stood in its epicenter. The page was turning, but which story would unfold? With the air thick with uncertainty, the question remained, could he control the chaos he had released, or would it drown him whole? Paul's heart raced, the clash of thunder echoing in his ears as shadows crept ever closer. The crowd around him was a blur of faces, eyes wide with terror. He could feel the looming darkness pressing in, thick and suffocating, wrapping around him like chains, heavy and cold. What have you done? He repeated, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. The woman who had previously warned him was now staring at him incredulously, her hands trembling, face pale. The stranger's smirk twisted into a grotesque smile, as if savoring the fear brewing in the air. You've opened it. You've let it in. His voice boomed, shaking with a mixture of excitement and dread. Paul's fingers trembled over the pages once more as he fought to hold on to his fading sense of self. What had he unleashed? Each letter felt like a spark, igniting memories, fears, and regrets. The dark whispers around him clawed at his resolve, flooding his mind with images of past failures. Friends lost, dreams forsaken. Could he really confront this specter? Paul! The woman screamed, her voice cutting through the chaos. You have to close it. But it was too late. The words had rung out into the night, creating a rift where light and dark collided. Something snarled in the shadows, a low rumble that churned the pit of his stomach. The reverberation of the crowd's fear built into a crescendo as the darkness stretched, reaching for Paul with clawed hands. His legs felt rooted to the spot, a weight pulling him down. He could hear the gasps, the cries, the frantic whispers gathering like a storm. Peering into the heart of the book, he could see shapes emerging, ghostly outlines of people from his past, their faces twisted in agony. They looked back at him, accusing, pleading, trapped forever in a cycle he helped create. No! Paul shouted, shaking his head, tears stinging his eyes. This can't be real. Face them. The stranger shouted, still hovering nearby, eyes glinting with unholy glee. You brought them here, you have to confront your truth. You can't hide anymore. The storm within him matched the chaos enveloping the crowd. It was as if the very fabric of his being was unraveling. He could either succumb to this nightmare or find the strength to break free. Do it now. Choose your story. The stranger urged, stepping closer, his intensity overwhelming. Suddenly, the images before Paul shifted dramatically. A younger version of himself emerged, eyes wide with fear, trapped in a moment he desperately wanted to forget. Paul felt his heart clench. That boy had been him, vulnerable, lost, a reflection of his own greatest insecurities. He hadn't just stepped into a battle, he was now on trial, facing his own past. The dark shapes writhed, voices spilling like molten silver, a cacophony of accusations, heart-wrenching and furious. "You let us down," echoed one. "You abandoned us," shouted another. The words pierced him like shards of glass, slicing deeper into his soul. "Stop!" Paul cried, hands pressed against his temples, desperate to block out the truth. But it was too late. The shadows grew stronger, feeding off his fear. "Embrace it," the stranger roared. "Only then can you let it go." As the darkness lunged forward, Paul felt the pulse of energy within him. A fire ignited his hidden potential, flickering to life. He summoned every ounce of strength, facing those haunting reflections. "I refuse to be your prisoner," he shouted, the words reverberating into the void. "I will not carry your weight any longer." All at once, blinding light erupted from the book, and a shockwave washed over the area. The shadows recoiled, howling in rage as Paul pushed back. Just as hope surged within him, a profound silence descended. The crowd was frozen, their expressions a mix of awe and terror. Had he just turned the tide? But even as warmth enveloped him, doubt flickered. Was this truly the end? Or merely the eye of the storm? As the crushing darkness retreated, a single, chilling question lingered in the air: what price would Paul pay for his newfound freedom? The moment felt suspended in time, pregnant with the promise of change. In the heart of that uncertainty, a singular thought emerged: this battle was far from over. The stranger's eyes gleamed with sinister anticipation. "This is only the beginning, Paul. Are you ready to discover the truth of who you really are?" And with that, the relentless thunder began to roar once more, signaling that the real reckoning lay ahead. The silence shattered, replaced by the heavy drumbeat of Paul's heart. He could still feel the heat of the light pulsating around him, but the shadows lingered, creeping back as if biding their time. The crowd, still frozen in disbelief, began to murmur, sharing words that were as confused as they were terrified. Paul turned, desperation coursing through him. "What do you mean by the truth? What more is there to face?" His voice trembled, a subtle crack revealing the frailty beneath his brave facade. The stranger stepped closer, the darkness swirling around him like a cloak. "Oh, Paul. Only when you lay bare your soul can you truly banish what's been unleashed. The rift has opened, but the real horror lies within you." His smile was predatory, sending chills racing down Paul's spine. In that moment, a flicker of realization ignited within Paul. The echoes of his past weren't just voices, they were shadows of his own choices, the consequences etched onto his heart. Guilt and regret clawed at him, and he felt a wave of urgency wash over him. "What do I have to do?" he asked, the weight of his past pressing down like the chilled air before a storm. The woman who had warned him earlier took a step forward, her eyes filled with empathy and fear. "You must perform the ritual, Paul. Only by confronting each piece of yourself can you close the rift and banish the darkness." "Ritual?" Paul echoed, dread settling in his gut. "What kind of ritual?" "Your story is woven through the darkness," the stranger interjected. "You must relive the moments that brought you here. The failures, the betrayals, the fears. Only then can the shadows be vanquished." Paul felt nausea rise in him. Reliving the pain. That thought was unbearable, a heavy shackle binding him to the ground. He could almost hear the voices of those he had wronged, echoing their disdain, yet, as the darkness whispered around him, he felt a flicker of hope amidst the weight of despair. "If it means freeing everyone and myself, I'll do it," he said, resolve hardening in his core. The stranger clapped. "Ah, there's the spirit. Now, let us begin." With a snap of his fingers, a circle of light formed around Paul. The shadows recoiled almost piteously, tightening their grasp on the edges of the light. The air crackled, anticipation intertwined with trepidation, moments swirled around him like a tempest. The first vision surged forth, a memory rushing back his best friend's face, crumpled in betrayal, tears streaming down cheeks that should have been filled with laughter. "You didn't stand up for me." The boy shouted, his voice a haunting echo that felt like a knife twisting in Paul's chest. "No." Paul yelled, hands reaching out as if he could grasp the darkness threatening to consume the memory. "Stop. I was scared. I didn't know what to do." But deep down, he felt the truth settle in like a stone in his stomach. He had chosen silence over courage. The second vision hit his father, disappointment etched into rugged features. "You let me down, son," the words cracked like thunder in Paul's ears. Rage and sorrow collided in his chest, a tempest of emotions churning violently. He wavered, the shadows creeping ever closer, clawing at his resolve. "I'm not that boy anymore," he roared, battling the echoes of past mistakes with hesitant determination. But the memories were relentless, dragging him back into the depths of remorse. "You must confront all that you've buried." The stranger's voice boomed. "Only then can you reclaim your power." Paul steeled himself. He felt himself spiraling, but amidst the chaos, his heart surged with a desperate need for closure, a fierce fight for redemption. "I won't let you take me," he shouted defiantly, pushing against the weight of darkness. As more memories flooded in, ripples of anguish threatening to drown him, he realized one undeniable truth: freedom was never promised, but it began with acceptance. The crowd held its breath, the air thick with anticipation. Each vision tugged fiercely at the core of Paul's being, dragging him closer to the brink of revelation that he faced not only his past, but the torment he'd inflicted upon himself. It was a reckoning painful and raw. The shadows swirled wildly around him, testing his resolve. Would he break under the weight of his truth or rise anew? As he prepared to dive deeper still, a sudden realization struck him. The ritual wasn't just about confronting the past, it was about changing the story forever. A crack of lightning illuminated the night, throwing their surroundings into sharp contrast. Everything felt electric, charged with impending truth. But before he could fully grasp what awaited him next, the stranger locked eyes with him, a smirk of satisfaction curling his lips. "Are you ready to face the consequences? Because the darkest parts of yourself are next and they won't show any mercy." And with that, Paul felt the very ground beneath him start to tremble, the shadows closing in as the storm broke loose once more. The shadows writhed restlessly, whispering secrets that slithered through the air like a tainted breeze. Paul's heart raced wildly, the fear coiling tightly around his chest. What awaited him in the depths of darkness? With a deep, shuddering breath, he braced himself for the onslaught of memories yet to come. The first wave crashed over him, a blurred image of a dilapidated house. The stench of mold permeated the memory, harsh and suffocating. Inside, a young Paul cowered under the kitchen table, his mother's voice tremulous and terrified. "Stay hidden, baby. Don't come out." The heavy thud of boots echoed through the hallway, followed by an explosion of rage that shattered glass with its ferocity. "Please, not this." Paul gasped, covering his ears as if the memories could be quieted by sheer will. But there was no stopping them. The door swung open, and the man's furious face materialized, eyes like burning coals. "You worthless piece of trash!" he roared. The words sliced through Paul, each syllable seeping into his very being. He remembered how small he felt there, how fear made him shrink into nothing. "I wanted to protect her," Paul screamed, tears streaming down his cheeks. "But I was too weak." Even as he yelled, he could feel the room growing darker. The walls flickered like an old film reel, the edges fraying, and his mother's face twisted in despair, filing away the last pieces of her hope. "Entertain this guilt, Paul," the stranger's voice purred from the shadows, echoing Paul's tormented thoughts. "You carry its weight like a heavy chain. But tell me, how many times did you wish to scream back? How many times did you remain silent, like a slave to fear? Each word twisted deeper into Paul. It was true. He had remained silent too many times. The memories came cascading like a waterfall. Times he had muted his voice, buried his thoughts, and tangled himself in a cocoon of fear. Then came the next vision, the girl he loved, Emily, staring at him with unbridled hurt. You chose them over me. She choked out, her words laced with betrayal. You couldn't even stand up for us. No. Paul shouted into the swirling darkness, frantic now. I loved you. I did. But love hadn't been enough to sever the ties of his past. Exactly, the stranger chimed, delight glimmering in his eyes. Love doesn't erase the stains. It only unveils them. Ducking away from the truth transforms you into a slave, Paul. A slave of your own making. With every memory, the shadows curled tighter around him. Paul could feel their icy grip threatening to crush him. But beneath the pain, a flicker of resolve ignited. He remembered the whispered questions of the girl he'd inevitably failed. He could change. Face me. He shouted. I won't let you define me. The ground beneath him shook violently, the circle of light flickering and sputtering. He could see the silhouettes of the crowd growing restless, their faces a mix of hope and dread. Bravery doesn't come from feigning strength, Paul, the stranger hissed, his tone tainted with annoyance. It's born from the willingness to confront what you fear most. Paul clenched his fists, feeling the warmth from within him rising. I accept all of it. He declared, his voice rising above the dark crescendo. Every failure, every shame, they are part of my story, and I will reclaim it. As his words left his lips, the air stirred violently, the shadows recoiling momentarily. But it wasn't enough. They lunged forward, enveloping him in a maelstrom of anguish and regret. Then you're ready for the final confrontation, the stranger growled, his eyes gleaming with challenge. In that dire moment, Paul felt brute terror flooding his veins, but determination surged even stronger. This has to end, he breathed, preparing himself for the true battle against the darkness within. But as the shadows pressed in and the memories began to twist and warp into something unrecognizable, the stranger's mocking laughter echoed through the chaos. You think facing your demons means you'll win? Think again, your darkest fears are waiting just beyond the light. And as the final shreds of light flickered above him, Paul knew one thing for certain, the fight was far from over, and the real horror was yet to be revealed. Paul felt the weight of despair as the shadows surged around him, pulling him deeper into their embrace. Each scream and vicious taunt of the stranger echoed in his mind, igniting old fears and raking raw wounds. Where was the bravery he had just shouted about? It felt so small amid the encroaching darkness that he braced himself, chaos swirling like a tempest. Memories twisted grotesquely, faces of loved ones morphing into grotesque masks of judgment and disappointment. Emily's once loving eyes now bore the rage he feared, their warmth replaced by an icy void. Face it, Paul. The stranger jeered. This is who you are. A coward at heart. No. Paul shouted, anger flaring inside him. But as soon as the words left his lips, doubt crept in again. Was he really brave enough to confront his past? The shadows laughed, a chilling chorus that sent shivers coursing down his spine. With each pulse of laughter, the memories pulsed brighter, bolder. The dilapidated house came rushing back, the rancid smells, his mother's tear-streaked face. Are you ready to dive deeper? The stranger's voice rasped, creeping into Paul's thoughts like a snake. You've claimed your guilt, but do you dare explore the very core? Paul shook his head, a tremor coursing through him. I don't need to, he murmured, feeling the warmth from his own resolve starting to waver. But the stranger only tilted his head, eyes glinting with sinister intent. Think of all the chances you had to speak up, Paul. The times you were afraid to be yourself. Those moments defined you. You never fought back, did you? Binding tendrils began to snake around Paul's arms and legs, but he struggled, pulling against their grasp. Stop. I want to let you take me again. Then confront what you hide. The truth is not your enemy. It is your ghost. The shadows shifted, morphing around him until they formed scenes from his life, faces of classmates he let down, friends he abandoned. Emily appeared again, but this time, she wasn't angry. Do you really think I left you, Paul? Her voice was softer now, gentler, filled with an aching sadness. You turned away from everything. Tears streamed down Paul's cheeks as he whispered, I wanted to be brave, but... I know, Emily replied, stepping closer, her expression filled with compassion and understanding. But bravery is more than defiance, it's vulnerability. You're not weak for wanting to keep others safe. It's okay to be afraid. The shadows began to recede as her words wrapped around him, warming him from within. For the first time, he felt the tendrils loosen, allowing him a breath, a moment of clarity. That's it, Paul, the stranger snarled, face twisting with rage as the shadows lost their hold. Don't let her fool you. You're the coward in this story. Paul took a step forward, emboldened by her presence. Every face, every moment of fear collided within him, creating a swell of emotion. I am not a coward. He yelled, the sound echoing like thunder, but the stranger was ready, scowling as he unleashed a fresh wave of darkness, swirling and thrashing as it tried to engulf Paul once more. But you doubt yourself. Let me show you what waits when you refuse to confront your fears. And in that swirling black vortex, Paul spotted a flicker of something he had buried deep, his most painful memory, the foundation of his fear. Heart racing, he realized what he had to do. It wasn't just to fight, it was to confront. As the storm howled around him, Paul stood tall, ready to face the enigma hidden away, the moment that would either define him or shatter the chains binding him forever. Show me. He cried out, a challenge resounding through the tempest. That in a heartbeat, the shadows stilled. The air grew thick with anticipation, and what lay behind that shadowy veil trembled, waiting to be released. What was it that challenged his resolve so deeply? What would it take to defeat the darkness? Paul's heart slammed against his ribcage, and he realized the truth was finally at arm's reach. But at what cost? The shadows shrank into an uncertain haze, their malevolent whispers muted as they withdrew. Paul felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation clawing at his insides. The veil between him and the truth thinned, and his gaze fell upon the pulsating darkness in front of him, as if the very fabric of his past was laid bare. Face it, then. The stranger's voice was a savage rasp, dripping with contempt. Let us see what lurks behind your cowardice. Before Paul could lose his nerve, the darkness quivered. Shapes began to emerge, ethereal figures from another time. A dim light caressed familiar forms, the faces of his mother, his childhood friends, and then, a younger version of himself, eyes wide with innocence but shadowed by lurking fears. Help me. The boy cried, his voice tinged with desperation. Paul's heart ached at the sight, a reflection of everything he abandoned. As if sensing Paul's hesitation, the stranger sneered. You think you've matured? Look closely. You still run from this. You are nothing without your memories, Paul. Who do you think you are? Blood pounding in his ears, Paul clenched his fists. The boy trembled under the weight of his own helplessness. How familiar it all felt. He remembered the nights spent staring at the ceiling, the paralyzing fear of doing the wrong thing, of being judged. He had convinced himself he was saving others by staying silent. A coward, was that really all he was? No. He shouted louder, grounding himself. I can't hide anymore. Forcing himself to step forward, he reached out to touch the younger version of himself. The boy flinched but then looked up, searching for reassurance in Paul's eyes. What are we going to do? He asked, the quivering voice trembling with the weight of unshed tears. Paul's throat tightened, huge and unyielding. He saw it now, a moment when he could have spoken up. It echoed in his mind, a cruel joke played in the schoolyard, a friend mocked into silence while Paul stood frozen, paralyzed by fear. That was his regret, the reason for his self-imposed exile from bravery. "Let us talk," he said softly, kneeling. "I'm here with you now. We can face this together." The boy's eyes filled with uncertainty, but glimmers of hope peeked through the cracks of despair. "We're here." "Yes," Paul breathed, a fire igniting within. He turned back to the stranger, who was growing smaller, fading in the light of his own resolve. "We can face this." The darkness intensified for a moment, swirling wildly, trying to reclaim its dominance. The shadows screeched, a cacophony of panic and rage. Paul felt the surge of past pain threatening to engulf him, but he stood firmly, shoulders squared, guarding the boy beside him. A fierce wave of compassion washed over him, merging with anger for the boy that had once been lost, and a hard-won resolve to protect him now. They were together, two souls forged from the same pain. "Your time is up," the stranger hissed, shrieking as tendrils of darkness lunged toward them. Paul lifted his chin, addressing the shadows with newfound authority. "You don't control me anymore." In a single breath, he propelled forward, the lingering doubts unraveling behind him like forgotten threads. The shadows tried to wrap around him, but he felt an electric pulse, a connection to the boy strengthening each step he took. And then, a crack like thunder erupted, shattering the malevolence. The dark forms buckled, shrieking in terror as the light of truth broke through the seams of the nightmare. But just as clarity broke through the storm, an unsettling silence fell. The stranger's laughter ceased, replaced by a threatening calm. "Very well, Paul," the voice echoed, chilling him to the bone. "You think you've won? The darkness you've stirred is only the beginning." Paul's heart raced, uncertainty coiling in his gut. What had he released? The echoes of unfinished business lingered, insistent and haunting. "What awaits you next is far worse than you can fathom," the whisper teased, pulling him deeper into his own fears. With his resolve shaken but still burning, Paul stepped back, bracing for the next wave. What lay ahead? Would he ever truly confront the darkness that lingered within? The answers teetered just out of reach, lurking behind the shadows, waiting to see just how far he was willing to go. Would he hold on to this fragile bravery, or was everything he fought for about to crumble? The stillness felt like a tightrope stretched across an abyss. Paul stood with the trembling boy beside him, both of them unsure what to do now that the shadows had retreated. His heart still raced, pounding in sync with the unsettling aftershocks of the stranger's parting words. "What do we do next?" the younger Paul whispered, glancing nervously toward the now dissipating darkness. I don't know," Paul replied, the weight of fear pressing heavily against his chest. His breath quickened. The sense of victory faded, replaced by an encroaching dread. The battle was far from over. Suddenly, a flicker of incandescent light illuminated the remnants of the shadows. The spot where the stranger had stood flared briefly, revealing curling wisps of shadows, almost alive, grasping at the air as if they were trying to claw their way back into existence. The boy flinched, instinctively moving closer to Paul. "Is it coming back?" he murmured, eyes wide and innocent. "No," Paul said forcefully, though he wasn't sure what to believe. "We faced it together." He wanted those words to be true, to be a promise he could keep, but answering the fear with bravado felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, foolish and reckless. As if in response to his uncertainty, tendrils of darkness swirled around them, slithering closer. The shadows pulsed like a heartbeat, thickening as Paul instinctively shielded the boy. "I won't let it take you," he yelled, pushing back against the creeping darkness. For a moment, the vacuum of silence enveloped them both, broken only by the rush of his heartbeat echoing in his ears. Then, without warning, a piercing scream shattered the air, a cacophony of anguish that seemed to ripple through the world. Paul's skin prickled, and he felt the boy grip his arm, trembling. "What was that?" the boy gasped, eyes darting around. "I don't know," Paul breathed, scanning the thickening dark. It felt alive, crawling with a sense of menace, like it was preparing to awaken once more. Then he recalled the stranger's words the darkness stirred, hinting at unfulfilled promises and unbroken chains. "Paul," the boy pressed, fear lacing his voice. "Are we just going to stand here?" "No." Paul shouted, shaking off the shadows of fear. He could feel a resolve pulsating within him, a yearning not to return to the silence, the inaction that had defined so many years. "We have to move. We have to find the source of this darkness." "Where?" The boy blinked, uncertainty clouding his innocent features. "There," Paul said, pointing ahead to where the flickering light cast a halo above a roiling void. It pulsed as if it was beckoning them, an ominous glow promising a path carved from the nightmares they knew all too well. With a determined push, Paul took the boy's hand. "Trust me," he urged. "Together, we can face anything." The boy hesitated, then squeezed Paul's hand, finding safety in the grip. Off they went, a steady march against the tide of darkness that threatened to consume them. The light flickered, morphing into diverse forms, shapes of their regrets and failures, memories steeped in sorrow. "This isn't just our past, it's our future," Paul shouted, his voice a rallying cry as they moved closer to the light. Suddenly, the ground beneath them gave a violent shudder, splitting open with a deep groan. Dark tendrils shot up, trying to ensnare their feet. "No!" Paul yelled. He yanked the boy back, barely avoiding the grasping shadows. "Keep running!" Paul shouted, adrenaline pushing them forward as they swerved around the writhing darkness. Deeper they plunged into the glow, a commitment that clung to the marrow of their being. Just as they reached the threshold of light, the shadows screeched, blending into a whirlwind of violent sound. The stranger's voice echoed through the chaos, "You're too late. The truth is not a refuge, it's a cage." In that instant of desperation, an overwhelming force knocked them backwards, crashing into an unseen barrier. Paul winced as pain shot through him, but the painful burn ignited a raw defiance. "Fight it!" he commanded, pushing against the unseen weight. And then he felt it, the light coalescing around them, ready to burst free. But just before they broke through, the darkness twisted and coiled around their memories, threatening to drag them into oblivion. The boy screamed, raw fear blinding him as frozen moments of shame and inadequacy filled the air. What awaited them on the other side? Would the truth be their salvation, or would it lead them into a deeper labyrinth of suffering? As they struggled, Paul had to wonder if he had the strength to wield it. In a moment fraught with uncertainty and a desperate urge to fight, he realized the next choice he made would shape their fates forever. What were they about to unleash? A truth, a nightmare, or something infinitely darker? The shadows rose and twisted around Paul, clawing at his essence. His breath came in sharp bursts, and the boy beside him trembled, eyes wide with both terror and defiance. Together, they stood on the precipice, caught between their fears and the light that beckoned from beyond the gloom. Paul's heart thudded like a war drum. He had fought so hard to confront his demons, yet here he was, faced with the possibility of them overwhelming him once more. But he wasn't just fighting for himself. The innocent boy at his side deserved better. He deserved to be free from the chains that had bound them both. "Take my hand," Paul said firmly, voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them. The boy looked at him, fear battling with hope in his eyes. "We can do this. Together." The boy hesitated, then nodded, reaching out. Their fingers met, sending a jolt of warmth through Paul. In that instant, he felt their connection, a bond forged in shared pain and unyielding resolve. "Let us show them what we're made of," Paul urged, determination flooding his veins. With a renewed sense of purpose, they pushed forward, the light before them flickering but growing larger with each step they took. The shadows recoiled, hissing as the radiance grew more tangible, stinging their ghostly forms as if they repelled them. Paul felt a surge of energy rise within him. This was his truth, and he wouldn't let it shatter into pieces. "Focus!" he shouted, remembering the faces of everyone he loved, those he'd let down, and those who had believed in him. "We are not cowards. We refuse to be bound by fear any longer. As the darkness spiraled around them, feeding off their doubts and insecurities, Paul channeled that energy into the bond he shared with the boy. We embrace the truth. We reclaim our story. A powerful light ignited from their connected hands, a beacon that surged through the shadows. In an explosive burst, it detonated into a spectrum of colors, illuminating the swirling mass of darkness that had once threatened to consume them. The shadows shrieked, their forms waving and dissolving into wisps of smoke, driven back by the unwavering light. Then came the uproar of familiar voices, the laughter of friends, the happy chatter from forgotten summer days, the echoes of support that had always surrounded him, like a warm embrace. Paul felt them all, lifting the weight of guilt from his chest. Fresh courage soared through him, propelling him onward. In that moment, Paul felt something shift. They had risen beyond their fears. With a united scream, Paul and the boy surged forward, propelled by their newfound truth. Together, they crossed the boundary of vibrant light, breaking free from the darkness once and for all. As they emerged from the void, the shadows collapsed behind them, swirling into an abyss until they finally vanished. Paul staggered forward, the boy still holding on tight, both of them breathless but alive. The air was different, it felt lighter, freeing. Paul turned to look at the boy, once more a reflection of his innocent self, eyes shining with newfound hope. We did it! He exclaimed, throwing his arms around the boy. The boy's laughter rang out, a pure, joyous sound that mingled with the fading echoes behind them, a promise of peace. They stepped away from the remnants of the battle, feeling sunlight pour over them, illuminating the path ahead. It was a new beginning, untainted by the past and infused with possibility. Paul was no longer living in the shadow of his mistakes, he was ready to shape the future, both for himself and for the boy he once was. The crowd, now bathed in the warmth of the dawn, erupted into cheers. Faces that had once been horrified now shone with admiration and empathy. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a metamorphosis from fear to liberation. Paul looked around, finally seeing the community that had stood vigil in the shadows. No longer a spectator, he had emerged as a leader, as a beacon of hope. Silently, he vowed to never let darkness drown him again. Let us carry this light forward, he said, voice ringing with clarity as he faced everyone. We all have our stories, and they are worth sharing. Together, we can build something beautiful and strong. Applause erupted, a symphony of support radiating through the streets. In that harmony, Paul found what he had always sought, acceptance and love, a chance to grow from the ashes of his past. And as the first light of day illuminated the horizon, Paul felt the weight of the world slide from his shoulders. His heart soared, free and unburdened. The chains had been broken, and he was no longer a slave to fear or regret. He stood in the dawn of a new day, arms wide open, ready to embrace whatever came next. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories. Let us connect.